Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Jim Olson. I'm the Director of Integrated Media at the Peabody Essex Museum, and this is Anna Lindgren-Streicher from the Museum of Science. She is Manager of Research and Evaluation. We're talking today about interactives and engagement. We'll try to keep it somewhat informal. Since it's only two presenters today, we'll both present for maybe about a half hour, a little over that, and take questions after each presentation, and then open it up to the floor for a larger discussion about engagement and audiences, if that works for everybody. So with that, Anna, it's all yours.
Great, thanks. And for those of you who are tweeting, we have the session-specific hashtag of MCN 2012 ENG for engagement. So today I'm going to be talking about developing interactives that are inclusive of people with disabilities. I'll start out with just a little bit of background on our approach and philosophy at the Museum of Science. Dive into a project that we're working on that involved some workshop hackathon type things to kickstart our development process, what came out of that, and then some unrelated work that we're doing, or unrelated to that specific project, but work that we're doing related to trying to develop universally designed touchscreens. So that's what's coming up. So at the Museum of Science in Boston for a little over 25 years, we've been using the universal design approach when developing our exhibits, programs, educational experiences in general. Universal design comes from the architecture and product development world, and it was really thinking about designing products so that they can be used easily without error for the maximum number of people, regardless of ability or disability. We also draw from universal design for learning, which is somewhat newer but comes from the formal education field. And that universal design for learning really thinks about and emphasizes the need for multiple flexible methods of representation, so how you're sharing and showing your information, expression, so how people are expressing and sharing their own knowledge, and engagement. And because museums are places where people learn through design, looking to architecture and product design as well as formal education made a lot of sense for us when we were trying to figure out how are we going to best reach people with disabilities in our exhibits and programs. So on the left, we've got an example where we have a history as a natural history museum converted to science center. And one of the first things that we attacked with this universal design approach was about 25 years ago, and it was one of our traditional natural history diorama type galleries. So in the bottom right, we've got the little girl sitting nicely in front of the diorama looking at the foxes, which is great for people who are visually inclined, who can take that information in visually, but cuts out a lot of people who might prefer or need to receive information through other modalities. So in redesigning this gallery, originally we added multi-sensory elements. So on the left there is part of the redesigned gallery where there's sort of a traditional diorama of a mother bear with cubs in the background. What was added on was an audio phone that had a description both of what was in the case as well, or what was in the diorama, as well as the content on the label. And in some cases plays background noises that give you an idea of the sense of place. There's also a sniff box, so you can smell what the different habitats smell like, which, you know, bears in a pine forest versus birds on the seashore are really different smells, as you can imagine. And one of the other things that has really been a hit for everyone, not just the target audience of people with disabilities, was we added some tactile elements. So in some cases, these were bronze sculptures of birds, but in some cases, we're actually able to get real taxidermied animals available for visitors to touch on the floor. So that there is a taxidermied bear that we have out on the floors at all times. So visitors can actually touch, feel, experience what a bear is like. We have a deal with, I think it's New Hampshire Fish and Wildlife, that when there are bears that end up as roadkill, they throw it in a freezer and give us a call. So we can have a rotating supply of bears, because as you can imagine, these wear down. You can sort of see some little bear patches on the bear's back where it has been touched and petted and occasionally ridden by the numerous children and adults who come through the museum. So that was really where we started, and for a number of years, we were doing a lot of hands-on, manipulative type interactives, and as a lot of places have been, we're starting to look more at computer-based interactives, not just mechanical hands-on interactives. And trying to think about, okay, how do you do that in a universally designed way that anyone, regardless of ability or disability, can use? And for a while there, it was fairly easy. We had a haptic button-based interface that people could use. There were really robust buttons that we got from gaming systems and things like that, and people could navigate through computer interactives that way. But that really limits the type of interaction you can have. You really get locked in if you're only scrolling back and forth and selecting things. Not to mention, there are lots of exciting options now, obviously, for computer-based interactives. A lot of places are moving to touchscreens, looking at multi-touch tables, Connect-based, whole-body, gestural-based interactives. And those offer some really exciting possibilities for what you can do at a computer-based interactive, but are really inaccessible to a lot of people with disabilities, especially visitors who are blind and visitors who have low mobility. So we wanted to, both for ourselves and something to share out with the field, figure out how can we use these new technologies that are, we think, going to become pretty ubiquitous or already have in museums, and really think about how do we use these in a universally designed way that reaches all visitors in the way that we want to. So we applied to the National Science Foundation for some money to investigate this for the Creating Museum Media for Everyone project. And the goal of it is really to further both our capacity and the field's capacity to continue developing innovative interactives and use innovative technologies, but in a way that's universally designed, that's accessible to people with and without disabilities. So as I mentioned, we got NSF funding for this, and our partners on the collaboration are Jim Spadassini and the folks at Ideum, and then a team from the National Center for Accessible Media at WGBH. And so we're working with them on this project to try to push forward, develop some exemplar interactives and tools for the field that will be open source and anyone can use to develop their own inclusive interactives. So how we decided to do this, we knew that we have some great partners, but we didn't have all of the expertise we needed to really attack this problem. So we held a week-long workshop series to kick the project off and really inspire us and get things going. So for the first 2 days, we had what we called the Possibilities Workshop, where we invited in a lot of museum folks and outside experts from academia, nonprofits, educational research firms, things like that. And that was really a 2-day period to get everyone on the same page about the project's goals, what we really wanted to accomplish. For the people who weren't museum folks, it was really important for them to learn about the museum environment and the opportunities and constraints that we have, which for people who are coming from formal education or academia can be a bit of a surprise, as I'm sure some of you know. And really get a chance to pick the brains of some of the great leaders in the field and experiment with the latest technology. So we brought in folks who presented about best practices for design in the museum environment, universal design and universal design for learning, different disability theories and models, so really thinking about how are we thinking about educating and interacting with people with disabilities. People who really think about how do you use technology to personalize experience, make sure everyone is getting the input and information they need in different modalities. Folks who do research on how emotion impacts learning and how that's different for people with different disability groups, especially on the autism spectrum. We brought in folks from a nonprofit, Able Gamers, who they just focus on games and gamification and video gaming for people with disabilities and how to make that experience as broad as possible for everyone. We heard about the needs of specific user groups in the museum, people who are blind, who are deaf, on the autism spectrum with various cognitive disabilities, different ways to conduct user evaluation, and also brought in a group that I'll talk a little bit more about later that just does data sonification, thinking about using audio in creative ways to represent data. And so it was a really packed 2 days, lots of presentations, people getting hands-on with some different types of technologies that we had that we're going to be able to use later in the week when we actually went hands-on and made things. And lots of time for discussion, exchanging ideas in small groups, starting to get that common language across all these different people from these different backgrounds. And that really set the stage for what we did in the second half of the week, which, depending on who you talk to, was either a hackathon, a design charrette, a prototyping workshop, which kind of exemplifies the different types of people we had in the room. But everyone was able to connect with this concept. And what we did was we split into 4 groups of about 8 people each, with different areas of expertise. There were some museum people in each group, someone who was really an expert on content learning, exhibit development, some folks with, we had people with disabilities in each group that also had expertise beyond their own personal disabilities. We felt really strongly that they had to be a part of this process, that we had to have that voice in the process. And then people with various backgrounds that dealt with the specific area that we were doing. So it was basically 2 days where we said, we gave each group a challenge, which I'll walk through each challenge, and said, here are the tools we have for you. Let us know if we can get more stuff for you to play with. Let us know when you need more coffee. Make some awesome stuff. We'll all come together in 2 days and see what everyone produced. Which for us was something that we had never done before. It was exciting. It was a challenge. We learned a lot about that, which I'll talk at the end. But we came up with some really awesome prototypes at the end of the week that we're going to be able to actually implement into real exhibits. And I think, the goal was to kickstart the innovation for the project and to get ideas out there and starting to work that we never would have thought of. And I think that's absolutely what happened for us. So the 4 groups that we split into, and just to give you a little background, so we had, some tech designers hacking away on things, content people writing scripts, writing labels, writing descriptions. One group that I'll talk to had this epic wall of posted paper to help them think through their ideas, and even in the top left is our director of exhibits hot glue gunning things to help get a prototype together. So everyone was hands-on getting dirty. It was fun. So the 4 groups that we split into, we had somewhat determined in advance of the workshop with the planning team, that core group of partners. And we were open and flexible to adding in sort of new lines of inquiry or creating new groups. But we knew we needed to somewhat define things, if for no other reason than we needed to get the hardware in place for people to play with and needed to start thinking about what that was. And it turns out that we had identified the common promising themes that came up throughout the presentations in the first 2 days, so it ended up working out well. So the specific challenge we were attacking that we thought would be something that would be common across different types of museums, different areas, was how do you display data or allow visitors to explore data in a way that's universally designed, that people with any sort of disability could engage in. When we originally submitted the proposal to NSF, we had 4 different types of exhibits that we were going to take through this process, come up with exemplars that we could share with the field. NSF said, that sounds really promising and exciting. We're not sure you can pull it off. Pick one, we'll give you a little less money, and then come back to us and let us know if it worked. So we're in the process of turning this into a real thing, and we'll reapply for more money from NSF, so we'll be able to explore different types of exhibits through this process. So we're all looking at representing, exploring, and sharing data on the floors. One group was looking at sonification. So beyond just giving a description of this is a bar graph and this is what each of the values of the bar graph are, what are different ways that you can use audio to allow visitors to explore and understand how data is shaped? And for this group, we ended up getting connected with Bruce Walker, a professor at Georgia Tech, and his data sonification lab, and they were awesome. He came and spoke. One of his grad students came and hacked away at prototypes with us. And they let us use their code base and everything to start to develop this interactive. So they were a critical partner on that data sonification part. We also figured that some sort of haptic or dynamic tactile feedback would be one way that you could do it. We had no idea mechanically how that would work, but we assigned one group to that haptic thing. Because we had folks from Ideum there, they're really pushing forward, and one of the people who are really doing the most work around multi-touch tables. And so we pulled together a group that was led by Jim, who's the lead of that group, as well as Charles Vesey, who's one of their programmers, to think about how do you make a multi-touch table universally designed. It's a super visual thing. It's something that can be really difficult for people with limited mobility. what do you have to do to make that a more universally designed experience? And that group ended up a little less focused on the specifics of data exploration, but came up with some really interesting stuff that they're continuing to work on. And then the last group was working on personalizing the museum experience. And I'm going to walk through the products we ended up for each of these and go into a little bit more detail. So there were two different groups. One was looking at understanding data through sonification, and one was looking at understanding data through touch or haptics. And what we actually ended up doing after the workshop was seeing that these two complemented each other really nicely. So we're going to develop an exhibit that includes both the sonification and the touch aspects. So that's why I sort of mushed them together here in the presentation. So the picture we've got here is a prototype, and that's one of our participants who is actually a blind computer programming PhD student at NC State University who helped develop the prototypes and also served as a tester and critical reviewer for a lot of the groups. And he's exploring, under his hand there is a puck. I think it might actually be like a petri dish, because this was a rough prototype with a pager motor inside. And they had it set up so you could either freely explore, and the intensity of vibration would change based on the amount of data. It was a scatter plot, the amount of data in that area. And it could also sort of guide you through the trend line on the data. So this group brainstormed a ton about different types of haptic feedback that you could get, some of which, like wet versus dry, really would not work in a museum environment, and settled on this sort of vibration as a way that people could pick out points, could understand how data was distributed. We also had understanding data through sonification, and this group, let's see if my video works here. Oh, shoot. Okay, yeah, that's right. We don't have sound right now.
Crank that up till you get an intimate group. Is it okay? A little bit?
A little bit. Can you kind of hear? So as it goes through, this is using a piano scale to understand how the data is distributed through. So in that group, they looked at various ways, whether it was a scatter plot, a bar graph, or a trend line, different ways that you could use sound. And they ended up going to music a lot, because that's something that you can create sounds that people understand and can follow more easily. So they chose piano for this one, but they played with a lot of other different types of tones to understand. And we're thinking that if we combine this sonification together with a haptic and some graphic displays, that'll be a really, really powerful way for people to explore data. And we figured out ways to start to make that happen. The group that was looking at, they ended up looking at adding an audio layer to a multi-touch interactive, and which is really a challenge in a dynamic moving environment that multiple people can be using at once. And so they thought about lots of different approaches for adding this audio layer, whether it was using RFID tags or barcodes to indicate your personal preference, swipe in somehow as you approach the table, whether there would be a push button interface that could snap it into a different mode, if there would be some sort of fiducial or object triggered thing that you'd pick up an extra object and use that to navigate through. And what they ended up starting to program out is using a 3-finger touch to activate an additional audio layer. So in this, it was just sort of an image browser with lots of different images, whether it's objects from a collection or all related to a specific area of scientific content. The one that they were working off of was something that they already had, Ideum already had, about Antarctic exploration. So basically, you can navigate around the table with this 3-finger touch motion, and when you come across something, it'll give a short, 2-3 word description of what that thing is. You can then tap with 3 fingers, much like you would tap with 1 finger, and you'd get more content popping out of that. Tap with 3 fingers, and it visually pops out with more content for people who want both the visual and the audio, as well as reading aloud that content and giving a more detailed description of the content that's in that picture so people can understand that. So that's something that they're just starting to play with and program out in a more robust way, not in a people programming overnight, let's see if we can make this work kind of way. And that's the same with that first exhibit I talked about. We're starting to dive more deeply into the exhibit development process, hoping to have things out on the floors to test with visitors with and without disabilities in February or March, and then have hardened things up for summative evaluation by this summer, so we'll know if it actually worked. We're hoping it does, though. Looking promising. The last group looked at personalization in the museum. Understanding that we're taking a universal design approach, we want everything to be accessible to all people. Just walk up, it works, use it. But thinking about if there are specific situations where people have different needs as we move to more technology or computer-based exhibits, that allows for a more dynamic, flexible modes of representation of information. So thinking about, could people personalize language, text size or color? If you've got low vision, you can make it super high contrast and much bigger. The size of the images, whether you want descriptions of video or audio, whether you want audio at all, what you want the volume to be. For people with cognitive disabilities, when there are sort of time-limited activities, getting extended time to complete things. The level of content that's being shared. If you're bringing your own personal device that you prefer to receive your content on, what would that look like? So this was a really sticky, complicated issue. Things like budget constraints come up, when and how visitors would indicate their preferences. How do you make them actually understand what they're choosing? Is it even possible to personalize when multiple visitors are collaborating on things? And really, is this a venue or an area that museums could start to explore? So this group is going to dig more into these issues a little bit more, get some more museum voices into it to really understand, is this a possibility to offer personalized museum experiences for different visitors who want these different types of inputs and ways to understand and experience things? So that's what we've done so far. As I said, we're working on making these hacked together prototypes a reality to put out on our floors right now. And so we'll have more to share. On my last slide, I've got the project's website, which is brand new, but we're going to be adding content throughout the development process and keeping people up to date on what we're trying out, and certainly post any prototyping results, videos of the prototypes, and all of that as we go. So what did we learn about running this workshop hackathon? So it was an experiment, as I said. If we bring this many people together with these different backgrounds, is it actually going to work? Is it going to be a lot of time spent arguing about language and approaches and things like that, or can we actually get things done? We can actually get things done. We can actually get interesting ideas out of it. That was a really exciting thing. And we actually got workable prototypes after, depending on the group, some of them spent 2 hours defining the problem and then dove in and started making things. Some of them spent a day defining the problem and then dove in and started making things. But even regardless of that time period, everyone had workable prototypes by the end of that 2 days. We did find that participants needed common background information. There was some critical groundwork that we laid about the museum context and experience for those who were coming in outside of the museum context, and there was some critical context that we laid about working with people with disabilities and understanding what that experience is like, because there were a lot of really talented designers there who had never worked with people with disabilities. And one of the critical things we did there was we created personas, sort of composite people with disabilities, to help people think about a visitor with a disability. What is their museum experience like? Who are they coming with? How do they want to receive their information? How do they engage with exhibits? And we pulled that from real data that we've collected for different past evaluations and research studies. And those are things that we're going to continue to refine and then make available to other folks who are interested in thinking about what are the needs of people with disabilities in museum settings. What does their experience look like? But I think that was a critical piece to help people really think through this broad spectrum of people who might be coming to their museum. We found that it was absolutely critical that people with disabilities were included in the design process from the beginning. They were presenting not only about their experience with disability, but also their area of expertise, whether that was exhibit design, software development, hardware to use in science labs. So they were not just people with disabilities speaking to their experience with disabilities, but had legitimate expertise in areas that were really important to us. And having their voices around the table were really important, not just to make sure that we were developing designs that would meet the needs of people with disabilities, but also for the rest of the professionals around the table to have that experience working with someone with a disability really drove home the point that this is an important audience whose needs they wanted to meet. If you have a friend who's a computer programmer who's blind, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what is he going to be able to use this exhibit I'm designing? It becomes more personal, more immediate. I mentioned the personas as another useful tool for keeping end users in mind. As we went through the design process, different groups referenced that, could Jacob use this interactive? How's he going to interact with this? How's he going to understand this? Which was useful. And we also found that various forms of documentation were important, both for understanding and sharing what the different groups and also as we're doing, and also as we go into the actual development process. So we had note takers in each group who were taking more traditional notes. There's a lot of photography going on. And then we also had a person who had a flip cam who was assigned to take video of sort of critical moments like, we just figured out something important, let's do a quick video diary of it, as well as demonstrating the different products. And we've put all those up. They're linked through the website and on a YouTube channel. So those are publicly available as well. So it was a really intense process, both to plan and run, but it ended up yielding some really great results for us that we're now able to turn into real exhibits that we'll be able to both put out on the floors. And the plan is to be sharing all of these either through Open Exhibits, which is a project that Jim Spadassini and his crew at Ideum are running, which really looks at those multi-touch tables, so that audio layer will be available through Open Exhibits. And we're looking at the software we develop for the audio and tactile representation of data, making that available through GitHub or something like that whenever it's actually available. We'll post it on the website so other people can freely use that code, and it can really be a resource. In addition, we're going to pull together some documents about what our process was, about really how we went through this design process, both planning and running the workshops, as well as the nitty-gritty of the exhibit development process. So if you aren't going to run this big week-long hackathon, what can you do in your design process to make exhibits that are more accessible for people with disabilities? So that's the Creating Museum Media for Everyone project, and I just wanted to quickly share some other exciting work we're doing at the Museum of Science. And of course, I say we. I'm not a software developer. I'm an evaluator and a project manager, but I work with really smart, clever people. So it's the royal we here. So one of the things that we didn't quite get to tackle in CMME, but we knew was an important issue, was touchscreens. That's something that more and more museums are starting to use, that we're starting to look at obviously using them in our own institution, but understanding that, especially for people who are blind and people who have low mobility, they're really challenging to use. So the head of our software development team came up with this concept that we actually got to test out when we were prototyping an exhibit for a new exhibition, The Hall of Human Life, that's going to be opening next fall. So we built a little prototyping space, and through these exhibits out on the floor, so you can see there are two touch screens and a little kiosk there, and each one is mirrored on the opposite side. And this is actually a partner activity where you do some things on your screen, you talk to your partner, share your opinions across, and then go through. And so he was really looking at what can we do in the design of these touch screens to make them accessible for anyone. And the system that he came up with that we've done some formative evaluation on and has actually really worked. I say with surprise because I was a doubter and now I'm presenting it at a conference, was to use a swipe method to navigate through and select things. So instead of hitting a specific area on the screen, whether it's content that you want or an arrow to go to the next thing or selecting a specific thing, you're swiping through the options. That's a really easy motion for people with limited mobility. And it's something that for people who are blind, their accuracy in making motions on the touchscreen isn't as high. So that's a motion that they can make really easily with fairly high accuracy. So this is a sample screenshot where you can see there are visual instructions about swiping to the left and right to explore different options that you can select, and then swiping down when you select your statement. And there's a little button on the side where you can activate the audio for it. So for people who are blind or would prefer to receive the information through audio, there's a speaker above that pipes it down in sort of a limited cone right above their head. But if you prefer not to have audio, you don't have to. And so this results in, I went through this with a colleague who's blind, and he was sitting across from me going through the exact same experience, navigating on a touchscreen using audio. We were having conversations about what we were selecting, arguing about our different choices. And it was a completely parallel, equitable experience, even though it was touchscreen based, which was really exciting. So this is something that we're still playing around with, how to optimize this, and then also I think swipes are the first step in figuring this out, that there are other gestures that we can start to add and other things that we can start to do to add some more flexibility to this. So if anyone's interested in the nitty-gritty details of this, let me know, and I can get you in touch with Ben Wilson, the software developer who's doing this work. And I'm sure he's happy to discuss in a lot more detail. So I've got the website up there for the Creating Museum Media for Everyone project. It's through Open Exhibits, openexhibits.org/research/CMME. And as I mentioned, it's a brand new website, so there's not a ton of content up there right now, but we'll be updating with more content as the project moves along, as we develop out the personas to share, and as we go through the prototyping process to share things. So right now there's some descriptions of the workshops up there, some videos of the different presentations, but more to come. So there's a lot of content I threw at you guys. Does anyone have questions?
Yes.
Sylvia.
Sorry, I came in a little late, so
Yeah.
I might have already addressed this. Is this, do you have similar approaches to create sort of interactive and experiences that are not for people with disabilities in the museum? Do you use a similar process of sort of starting the idea and putting together a new exhibit or installation in the museum? Can you talk a little bit? If so, can you talk about it?
Yeah, it's been 25 years since we started considering people with disabilities as audience members, and it's to the point now where pretty much we're considering them as part of the audience when we go through any exhibit development process. So we have certain principles, whether through legal requirements, Smithsonian access guidelines, or our own things that we've discovered through trial and error that we try to apply to any exhibit that we develop that makes it inclusive with people with disabilities. But that's it, for the most part, just a part of the exhibit or program development process that we have. This was sort of a special case where we did the Possibilities Workshop and Hackathon because we thought that this was such a different, trickier type of problem that we needed a different approach for it.
So just kind of to follow up on what you're saying, I sit on the advisory committee for the Smithsonian Access Program, and we're doing a lot of work with with a new rollout for children and families who have children with autism. And anyway, so I just wanted to ask a little bit more, sort of a fundamental question, which is that, because I think your work is really incredibly interesting, and I'm really glad that somebody's going at this, because it is a big undertaking to actually create new sort of technologies, but that's not usually the way people do things, right? Because one of the things we've been doing at Smithsonian is trying to adapt either the mobile application that's already in place, or developing an access-based app, or utilizing the iOS technologies so that children who have autism, and I know this doesn't obviously address everyone who has a disability, autism is very specific, and oftentimes is coupled with many other cognitive issues, but not necessarily blindness or deafness or anything. And so anyway, so I was going to ask, why not use existing technologies? Why go through the process of developing these other sorts of interactivities? I mean, there's a fundamental question there, right?
Yeah, and I think that sort of comes down to the fundamental philosophy, and really the approach we're using is the universal design approach, where anyone can walk up without having their own technology and be able to have an equitable experience at, whether it's an exhibit, a program, et cetera. understanding that there might be some specialized needs that we can't meet through that. And in that case, let's supplement with assistive technology, whether that's some additional audio guide for someone who's blind, an additional app for someone on the autism spectrum, things like that. So really, wherever possible, we're trying to build it into the existing educational experience and then supplementing with assistive technology as needed. And what we found when we do this is it actually makes it a stronger educational experience for everyone. When we added in all the multisensory elements to New England Habitats, for example, people's understanding of the content in that exhibit, people without disabilities, their understanding of the content exhibit shot up by like 30%. Yeah.
I think that's a really important
Yeah.
That I think also people kind of don't understand, which is that once you make it actually like more accessible, and that's sort of a general way of describing what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That sort of level of interactivity, that level of understanding, that level of
Yeah.
education.
And it's really about delivering the same content using multiple channels, multiple modalities, and using all of that to reinforce each other, not giving conflicting messages, but reinforcing messages, whether you're reading a label, looking at a graphic, doing something hands-on, getting it through audio. Yeah.
For your hackathon, did you, when you say you have museum people, was it strictly from Museum of Science?
No, we brought in folks from other museums. We ended up working with bringing in people from the Franklin Institute, Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, and San Diego Museum of Natural History. Those were, we picked some institutions that we work with through the Science Museum Exhibition Collaborative to bring them in, as well as some of the folks from the Balboa Park Cultural Park. Well, there's the online collaborative, and then there's also this professional something collaborative where they do professional development together. So we pulled in from existing networks that already exist, in the theory that if we bring in a few people from those groups, they'll be able to disseminate it out. So we're hoping that that'll be able to bring this to other institutions as well.
It was all science.
Yeah, it was all science museums, and part of that was, it's an NSF-funded project, so we really focused on science content. But I think certainly as we move forward, there are some areas to explore that are universal across museums, so that could definitely open up partnerships.
I would also say that science museums are a little bit more invested in this issue, working with persons with disabilities than history and art museums. So that's just a sort of fact. I'm not saying that in a critical
Yeah.
way.
No, which might actually be a good argument for bringing in art and history museums so they can push their sectors forward as well.
I had a question for you, kind of stepping back for a second. It's clear that we should all be doing this or trying to do as much of this as we can. Do you find in your conversations with people that the reason folks aren't doing it is a lack of expertise, a lack of time, institutional buy-in?
People, since this seems to be a conference where there's a lot of real talk, people always say that they don't have enough time and money to do this. My interpretation of that is that means it's not a priority for them. People find time and money to do things if it's a priority for them. So I think a lack of expertise is something that, and it can seem daunting, right? There's so much you can do, and even us at the Museum of Science, who've been doing this for 25 years, we look at some of our exhibits, we're like, oh my gosh, we screwed that up. That is not as good as it should be. And especially if you're starting from scratch. But I think really the thing is just start small, figure out one thing you can do, find some community partners that you can work with, people with disabilities that have expertise in the areas you're looking for, that can be critical friends in the development process, and just start small, make that first step, and see where that leads you. You don't need to do everything at once, because it can be daunting and overwhelming. So it's picking one thing. So it might just be, we think that this specific thing is going to be a touchstone experience in this particular gallery. So we're just going to try to make that one thing more universally designed so anyone can use that regardless of ability or disability, and just start with that. And one of the things that is sort of a theory that we have floating around at our own institution is that it's easier to push these things forward on big, actually high-profile projects that have larger budgets. So one place where we learned a lot and pushed ourselves as an institution forward a lot was a big traveling exhibit, Star Wars, where science meets imagination, that really looked at science and engineering within the Star Wars universe. And because that had NSF funding, had private funding, was super high profile, was really big, we were able to have the space to play around, try out different things, and really learn a lot about universal design through that exhibit. The touchscreen interactive is it's going to be a 10,000 square foot permanent exhibit that's really high profile at our institution. So it's got a longer development timeline, it's got a little bit bigger budget, so there's that room to play around a little bit and say, we're going to try this new thing. If it fails, we can go back to the old system, but right now we've got the time and space to play around with this a little bit and see if it actually works.
Any other questions? Well, with that, I'm going to turn the heat up because this is distracting and freezing us out up here.
Yes, it is.
And I'll start right up. Shut off.
We are locked down.
Just hand me that floor. Thank you. For those of you who came in late, again, my name is Jim Olson. I'm the Director of Integrated Media at the Peabody Essex Museum. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about a show we did from January 2012 up through, I think, April 2012 called Shapeshifting Transformations in Native American Art. And I'll just talk a little bit about the videos we produced for this that were delivered on iPads that had question prompts and then tried to encourage user-generated responses to create conversations in the galleries. This is a piece by Brian Youngen, and I have to point it out because it's absolutely incredible, and I might not have a chance to talk about it later. It's called Cytology. Brian Youngen is a Dunza Nation artist working out of Vancouver, and that piece, I don't know, it's 40, 50, 60 feet long. It is made out of plastic chairs, and it's those white lawn plastic chairs that you see everywhere, the ubiquitous plastic chair, and he cuts them up and makes this incredible piece. It's called Cytology, the study of whales, but there's obviously a pun, cytology, seatology, the seats that he's using. It's just an absolutely brilliant work. It's pretty incredible, and it tells you a little bit about some of the works that we had in the show, which gave the Integrated Media Department lots to work with. For those of you who don't know who we are at PEM, the Peabody Essex Museum is in Salem, Massachusetts. It's about 20 minutes outside of Boston. It was founded in 1799 as the East India Marine Society, which was basically a bunch of sailing captains who went all over the world and collected all kinds of curiosities and brought them back. And from there, the name of the museum changed several times. But we are the longest continuing operating museum in the United States from 1799. You can do some Google searching to find out who the other museum is who closed for a short period of time, but we won't talk about that in particular. We have a deep and far-ranging collection. It's about 1.8 million objects, a library with 400,000 volumes on campus, and 22 historic properties, including the Ward House from 1684 and a 200-year-old Qing Dynasty Chinese house, which was disassembled in China and reassembled in our actual building. So it's a pretty wild and eclectic place with wonderful experiences. It's really fun to be there. I've been there for about a year and a half and had the ability to work on some of these upcoming projects that I'll tell you about. The big news is that we're undergoing a major expansion right now. We have a $650 million capital campaign, $550 million of which has already been raised, and we will raise the additional $100 million by 2017. $350 million of that will go to the endowment. $200 million will go to a new building, which will add 75,000 square feet of exhibition space, making us, I believe, in the top 10 or 12 museums in the country in terms of size, all in Salem, Massachusetts. Additional $100 million will go toward fixing some infrastructure retrofitting some infrastructure within the current facilities. And we're hiring. So if anyone's interested, please talk to me after the presentation. We're actually adding on we're expanding our staff by about a third in order to fulfill what we need to fulfill in 2017. We're completely deinstalling the permanent collection, ramping up our exhibition schedule, and then in 2017, we'll fully have reinstalled our permanent collection. So it's going to be a fun project to work on, and I'll be very busy over the next 4 or 5 years. Sorry? Sure, tweet about it. Hey, I'll take the free advertisement. That's why I mentioned it. But just to give you a little context of the kind of projects we're working on and what we aim to do in the future. So first, I'll provide a bit of a brief overview of the exhibition, and then I'll talk more about the interactives and our goals of those interactives and some of the lessons that we learned from the project. There were 73 works in Shapeshifting, and they were created from Native artists from indigenous cultures in the U.S. and Canada, so North American artists. And they were selected to demonstrate a range of artistic expressions, ideas at times, and together they really tried to celebrate, and I think very successfully, the extraordinary diversity in Native American art. So this is a traditional piece that you would see, walking into any ethnographic museum. It's an approach that we definitely were trying to avoid with this exhibition. So the premise for the show, Shapeshifting offered an exciting new orientation for understanding Native creativity and art making as part of a dynamic, evolving continuum. So what was the impetus for the show? We were really trying to counter traditional notions of what we all encounter Native American art to be. So as anthropological specimen, mere craft, functional objects, oversimplified stereotypes of curios, and items that are lodged in the past. To give you an example of that, this is a piece by Nicholas Gallen, and what you're looking at are 2 film stills where it's a piece called thank you for turning that heat or air conditioning down, whichever it was. We will again open this container of wisdom that has been left in our care, parts 1 and 2. Part 1, you have a traditional potlatch ceremony-like dance being performed in the upper image, in both images on the left-hand side. And the soundtrack that has been replaced, or actually the artist is dancing to kind of a techno beat. And then after that loop plays through, you see a pop dancer, this guy kind of doing pop dancing to the traditional song that you would have probably heard in this potlatch ceremony. And this is kind of a continuous loop. And Gallen's work does a lot of this kind of dealing with the expectations of what you expect to see and kind of spinning that on its head. And it gets back to that idea of like all art, Native art is constantly evolving and changing and refreshes itself. We had a thematic approach to the show. Actually, the curator had a thematic approach to the show. And, Shapeshifting is distinctive from many other exhibitions in that we were pairing historical and contemporary works next to one another, regardless of time, regardless of region. We really wanted to show that there's a continuity and a connection between the past and the present. So they were grouped truly thematically. So this is the piece that opened the show. This is Kent Monkman's Théâtre de Cristal. And to give you an idea of what this piece is, this is the first thing you see as you walk into the galleries. It's not exactly what you expect Native American art to be. So we're already kind of establishing that this is going to be a different kind of show. It's a crystal teepee with a 4-channel video installation on the floor on a faux buffalo hide. The piece is called, the film is called Group of 7 Inches. And it depicts a transgendered Indian chief named Miss Chief Eagle Testicle riding a horse through a park. She encounters 2 Caucasians in loincloths, takes them back to his place, gets them drunk, takes advantage of them, writes on them. Flipping this whole idea of, cowboy versus Indian, white aggressor versus Native American, and flipping those roles so that the Native American culture is now overpowering the perceived white culture. That's the first thing you see, and you're like, okay. And then you walk across this bridge and you go into the next gallery, and that's where we establish the themes for the exhibition. So the exhibition themes were changing, which kind of underscored this idea of artistic innovation, knowing, explored the strikingly different ways that artists imagine, understand, and express their worldviews and ideologies. Locating, which examined the intersections between place and personal and cultural identity. And voicing, which looked at how individual artists express themselves to the changing world around them. As I mentioned, the two other monumental pieces in the show were the Kent Monkman, which was at the beginning, and the Brian Jungen, which I showed you on the first slide, which was at the end of the show, which really kind of bookended the exhibition. I could talk more about the Monkman piece. It's all kinds of art history, and George Catlin, who traveled, some of you may know, traveled the United States and Europe, I believe, with actually taking Native Americans with him and setting up teepees and then showing his work around that, was known to purposefully leave transgendered. There's the concept of two spirits, multiple spirits in Native American culture that is very much similar to transgendered ideas and theories today. He left a lot of that out, so Monkman is playing with a lot of those ideas, and they're calling the piece A Group of 7 Inches. There was a group of Canadian artists named The Group of 7, so he's connecting all of that full circle. It was a really interesting connection from the past to the present as well. So, if our ultimate goal was to kind of incite and invite change of perception and appreciation for the show, we wanted to have multiple points of entry. The artworks, of course, were the main point of entry. I mean, there you are. It's the work. That's the thing we want you to focus most on. The curator selected outstanding examples of art from across North America, and it was really based things on the visual qualities and also the conceptual affinities to the themes in the show. The design was pivotal. PEM takes design really seriously. It's part of a user experience. This is part of our brand is transformative experiences, and they do a lot of design work, and we're lucky to have a very talented design team that fully integrates design into the exhibition. We weren't interested in terracotta and sand colors and turquoise. We were interested in clean, simple design so that folks wouldn't fall into those same stereotypes you might see in some Native American exhibitions. And each artwork was given plenty of space, which was also important to us. We wanted to make sure that things weren't crammed into cases, as you might quite see in an anthropological kind of or an ethnographic kind of installation. Interpretation, we had labels, introductory objects for each section, and additional ways of connecting to the art. But we also had 3 different media components, and I'm getting into the media side of this thing. I wanted to make sure I set the context for what the exhibition was before I get into all of that. And there were 3 main components to that. One, we had a word cloud projection, iPad interactive stations, and kind of a summative experience at the end of the show, which I'll talk about right at the end of the exhibition. Throughout your interaction in the galleries, the exhibitions and the design of the actual show and the interactives was very unified in a lot of ways, and we're trying to get to that idea of being somewhat seamless of an experience for the visitor. So before I got to the museum, I should mention that I've been at the Peabody Essex Museum for a year and a half. I had about 6 months to work on this project when I arrived, so we kind of hit the ground running working on this project. But previous to my arrival, they did an extensive front-end visitor study that indicated that folks wanted to see artists personalized through media. They wanted to get a feel for who these artists were, learn about their individual creativity, and because in many ways, contemporary Native American art was unfamiliar to them. It gave them an opportunity to learn more. So we wanted to create multi-directional dialogue between the artists, the visitors, the museum, and the artwork, and offer insights into the inspirations for what these artists were doing in creating their work. We also wanted to encourage deep looking, which was and personal reflection, which were the main goals of the media, and I hope you'll see that as I discuss it, and to establish wide-ranging discussion as well. And of course, we wanted to allow the media to help establish those themes, so you know where you were in each of those themes. If you didn't quite remember your way as working through, we wanted the video to take the lead. Video was really important to us here as a form of storytelling for the artist. Oh, sorry. Accessibility, not in the sense of universal design. I will be quite frank and say none of this work was universally designed, and again, it's something that we should definitely all be focusing on. So here's the word cloud, and I'll describe this quick situation. We have house galleries that are 5 house galleries that are connected, and then there's one gallery that you have to step across a bridge to get to. So we took advantage of this bridge, and we presented a word cloud, which was the first of the 3 interactives. And what that was a cue that we would be asking you. In that label text, it would say, in the rest of the galleries, you will find iPads adjacent to other works in the collection, and we'd like you to answer some questions. What you're seeing here is the word cloud we seeded the word cloud with the introductory text of the curator. So it's in some ways the institutional voice. If you're not familiar with what word clouds are, as each word is used more, the word gets larger and larger. If a word gets used less, it gets smaller and smaller. So you can see words rising and falling from the surface here. This is actually dynamic, so it's moving around. And if we have time at the end, I can bring up the website version of this so you can see that. Over the course of the exhibition, we fed all of the visitor-generated responses into a CMS, which then changed the shape of the word cloud dynamically every 2 minutes or something like that. So that at the end of the exhibition, the word cloud reflected both the voice of the institution meshed with the voice of all of the visitors who came in through those 3 to 4 months of the exhibition. It was really nice, and I'll show you a slide at the end that shows you the before and after and which words came forward and which words went back. But this was kind of establishing the vocabulary right from the beginning. The second media component was the iPads, and we had 2 iPads per object for 4 objects, 1 object in each of the themed galleries. And we probably could have tried to do more, but with 6 months, it wasn't a possibility. And we thought that 1 was a solid starting point. And we tried to find works that were core to the theme that would make sense for a lot of people. We did 90-second videos of the artist talking about their work. And after which you presented a question. So right at the end of the video, you presented a question and asked to share your response. And again, these words, all the responses were fed back into the word cloud. And again, based on timeline, budget, and et cetera, we decided just to go with 1 per theme. We were also looking, when choosing, for a mix between male and female artists, tribal affiliations, geographical regions, and both historical and contemporary. You realize that some artists may be more talented in speaking about their work than others, so we kind of chose selectively to see which artists we thought would work best. We landed with Pat Pruitt in the upper left from Laguna Pueblo in the southwest, in Powate, New Mexico. Roxanne Swensel in the lower left from Santa Clara Pueblo in the southwest. She's in New Mexico as well. Kay Walking Stick, who is Cherokee, grew up in the South but now lives in New York City, very famous contemporary Native American painter. And Jonathan Perry, who is a Quina Wampanoag, who was talking about a 17th century club purported to be King Philip's war club. He actually makes war clubs now, so he's a good expert in talking about the work. I can show you a couple of quick videos right now, he says. That's the easiest way for me to do this. Get to the desktop. Probably just close out and then I'll come back to it.
You should also just be able to hit escape.
Yeah, that should get me there too.
That should get you out of the presentation.
No.
Okay.
Close this for a second, come back. There we go. That's the easiest way. Sorry, folks. This is Pat Pruitt.
My name is Pat Pruitt, and I'm from the Pueblo of Laguna. I'm a metalsmith, predominantly making jewelry and personal adornment.
Oh,
and I live in Peabody, New Mexico. CSST version 2.0 is a piece of corrugated stainless steel tubing that we use in constructing a house. It just has this bendability, this flexibility. Now the tines on it, deep down, some of the influence was by Egyptian collars, these just big, massive pieces that they wore, and really wanted to emulate that, but in my own style. I mean, it may have a very aggressive form, but you can wear it and it's extremely comfortable. You may not be able to hug the person wearing it, but you can still wear it, and that's the important part. Computer-aided drafting, computer-aided machining enables me to transform my vision of what I see into the material that I work with. I also have a background in mechanical engineering, went to school for that at Southern Methodist University. A lot of my influences come from being heavily involved in the body jewelry and the body piercing industry. With that comes influence from the tattooing industry. So that's where you see a lot of the real bold, tribal Native-esque styling that I like to use in a lot of my work because it appeals to me. The stereotypical version of what people think might be Native, it's the coyotes, it's the bows and arrows. When it comes to artwork, especially jewelry, it's the turquoise, it's the silver. I'm Native. Whatever I make in turn becomes Native because it's a part of me. The fact that it's categorized as Native is strictly because that's who I am, and not what the work represents.
So working with these artists was an absolutely incredible experience, and Pat is an amazing artist, and I actually wear Pat Pruitt now because I get to meet Pat Pruitt. I just had to buy something from this man. He was just totally, totally cool. I need to play one more for you. I want to play, hopefully this will show up on the right spot.
Hello, my name is Jonathan
Gonna move him
Perry,
over too.
and I'm a Quinawampanoag from Martha's Vineyard. I am currently a tribal council member for our tribal government. I look at this ball-headed war club, and I see the wampum beads. I'm actually wearing some sukupiag and wampum piag, the shell beads that are given by the people to a leader. Leaders had to be weighing serious matters. The option for war, the option for peace. Both options can have lasting implications. The breaking up and losing of a culture, traditions that have been passed down for thousands of years, a language, beliefs, ceremonies, practices. As a leader, you're carrying one of these items and thinking about what the people want and what kind of inheritance you want to give to your future generations. Although it seems like a simple war club, a simple piece of artwork is also a very powerful symbol of my existence today and why I am on this earth. A war club such as this was carried in an effort to maintain the tribal nation that I'm part of now. It'd be very easy for me not to be here and for my tribal nation to be something that you read about in books.
We had staged questions for him, and he pulled that out of nowhere at the end, and I looked at the curator, and she looked at me and like, was the camera running? And we both had like hair on the back of our neck kind of go up. It was just a really exactly what we were looking for, and it was really an exhilarating experience to interview him. He was wonderful. Let me get back and jump right in here. Hopefully that will go away on the side when I pull this up. Sorry, I'm a Mac user using this thing over here. Okay. Talked about the videos. Oops, sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to slide along. Here's a scroll bar. Come on. All right. So video production was a 6-month video production. Everything but the interface. It was a 6-month production overall. The video production took us about a month and a half in order to pare the videos down. They were shot and edited in less than 2 months before the opening of the show, which was not ideal, but it was the situation that we were working with. And in the end, we were pretty happy. Have any of you done video production work? It's kind of a labor of love in some ways. We had full half-day shoots for each of these artists with about an hour or maybe an hour and a half interview, and in the end we ended up with 90 seconds. So you have to leave a lot of gems on the cutting room floor, and it's always difficult to do, but it's always better to have more footage than less. So just a little bit of advice to, part with even those really great gems, because sometimes you just have to find that quick 90 seconds of what you need. In arriving at the questions, we constructed questions using Nina Simon's techniques for maximizing visitor participation by constructing questions that trigger and induce response, kind of grappling and really make you think about an answer and motivate authentic expression. We wanted visitors to draw from their own personal experiences, and they really did. Some of my favorite answers to questions, for the War Club, the question that we ask is, can you speak about an object in your life that has meaning or power? And I'll show you the actual question in a minute. And folks were talking about, things that passed down, the watch that my grandfather gave me, or the rolling pin that my Swedish grandmother used to make cookies when I was a child that I inherited. And these really powerful objects in their own lives that was bringing it back to their own personal experiences, which was really wonderful. we're open to anyone, regardless of their cultural background or education. And finally, we wanted to have people share thoughts that were interesting, so that others would want to consume those answers, so that we didn't have a bunch of yes or no questions for people to read through. And we've learned that it's a lot harder to come up with really good questions than you might think. And again, using Nina Simon's technique was really helpful. We actually didn't test the questions with visitors, but we tried something new in terms of getting staff buy-in. We put out a couple of pizzas and some soda during lunch break and invited staff from across the museum, brought in 40 staff members, put the objects, representations of the objects in front of them, and asked them to think about questions that they think would be interesting, that they would want to ask about that particular object. Then took all of those questions and laid those on tables, and then asked all of those staff members to walk around and answer those questions, trying to find which were the most interesting answers that we got out of that. And then from that, we selected we thought would be the best questions. We took those out into the field with interview questions that related to those questions, and in the end, we didn't really end up with the same questions we thought we would, but we came up with questions that were quite compelling and we thought were really, really interesting overall. Okay. So the final questions for changing. And without seeing the videos for the other two, you'll have a little trouble contextualizing this, but what other influences can you see in Pruitt's work for the first video we saw? For knowing, what do you imagine these figures are seeing as they look out into the world for the first time? And for locating, can you recall a place in your life that transformed you? And finally, for voicing, can you describe an object that voices a powerful story to you? And as I mentioned, we drafted the questions beforehand and tried to do the videos with that. So now into some of the technical stuff. What did we do? We did end up going with iPads, and someone asked why. Many visitors see iPads. They know what to do with them. They're very intuitive. The interface is simple. The keyboard is actually built into the system, so it's one thing less that we had to put out onto the gallery floor, although that keyboard is problematic, as anyone who has installed these things or uses them to try to take notes has learned. Very minimal instructions needed, although we did realize after the fact that having something as simple as tap here to begin was needed. Folks don't automatically understand that it is a touch screen. We have some older visitors, who may not use touch screens at all in their lives, which is more common than we might think. Super cost effective, in my opinion. Everything's right there. It's right in that box. And for us, it really was small enough, as you can see in the photo on the right, to kind of give an intimate experience, which was important because people were sharing somewhat personal, very personal responses at times. And to keep anonymity in some ways, it was small enough that you could type your answer and not feel like someone was standing over your shoulder to oversee what you were doing. And you can see the way we set them up here, one seated and one standing unit flanking the objects. They were all built in-house using the Korean material that was used in the rest of the exhibition and some brushed aluminum to tie into the rest of the exhibition, so it really looked like it was part of the show, not an additional kind of add-on that was added to the show later on. So we also visually tied the screensaver to the iPad, so you saw a static, not a moving word cloud on each of the iPads, reminding you of the instructions that you saw previous. You'd tap the screen to start, and then you would jump right in and look. And of course, tap screen to start can be pretty important. We've all experienced this stuff where you put it interactive in the galleries and you expect people to walk up and touch it. And I saw a very old gentleman walk up, and he put on both earphones, and he watched the word cloud for about 30 seconds, and then he put the headphones back down and he walked away. Didn't realize at all that you needed to touch the screen. That was one example of it. Most folks did pick up on it pretty quickly. So the iPad interface, this is actual screenshots of the iPad to give you an idea of what it looked like for the user in the gallery. So you watch the video, and then you would come upon this choice. You could watch the video again if you wanted. You could join the conversation by touching that, would bring up the keyboard. And then you could explore other viewpoints. So simple user interface, 1, 2, 3, make your choices, move in, move out. Pretty easy to navigate. So when you join the conversation, you can either touch the keyboard, which no one ever did at the bottom. The idea was once you touched the white screen, the keyboard would come up and you could start typing. You would type in your answer. And once the answers were were added, you could then go through and explore the viewpoints. Now, one of the things you'll notice in gray, you may not be able to see it from the back, but we did timestamp these, and you'll notice the timestamp is not particularly in order. That one looks like it's in order because we were testing at that point. We ranked the answers, and I'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of what we wanted. We wanted what we thought were the best, most engaging, most on-topic answers to rise to the top, which would encourage people when they read those really good answers to provide a really good answer in response. And I'll talk a little bit more how and why we did that in a moment. We did decide on moderation on the comments, and it was not for censorship, and it was not because we didn't want a bunch of kids typing in poop smells and it ends up on the screen. The idea was to keep things on topic. We wanted to start a conversation here, and we didn't want a bunch of noise affecting that conversation. So what we did was anything that we thought was on topic was actually answering the question rather than, the Peabody Essex Museum is amazing, this was wonderful, I had a great experience. We didn't want that comment. That was for the comment book that was elsewhere in the gallery. We wanted the people to actually answer the questions that we were asking. And the only way to do that was to moderate the questions. We did that as a team of three, myself, the curator, and the interpretive liaison on the project would share responsibility at night, during the day, at lunchtime, going in and simply and quickly in the CMS approving anything that was on topic. And I'll talk about how much noise we had. I have some statistics that I can share with you at the end. We devised a simple rating system from 1 to 5. And for example, a rating of 1 was on topic. So for example, an answer might be, if the question was, can you recall a place in your life that transformed you? The answer might be kind of, but not really in the same way the artist did. So we said, yeah, you're answering the question, so you get included there. Others like, which got a rating of, say, 3, can you describe an object that has a powerful story to you? An old hat that my grandfather gave to me right before he died would be an example of a 3. And a 5 would be something like, what do you imagine these figures are seeing as they look onto this world for the first time? And the answer we got was pathos, pain, and incredible joy and intricacy as they look and absorb. Clay particles that someday turn into skin and dust, then into snowflake stars brilliant on the plains. They see what I see and what I cannot see and could not say with words. And my feeling is if we got 5 of those, the entire project was a success. You're presenting creative objects to people and they're coming up with really creative responses, and that was really one of our goals for the show. So we did get quite a few of those, which was great. Sorry. And finally, we had a summative display at the end, which was located near the exit of the show. You can see the Brian Jungen piece there. And the idea was, it was a simple 50-inch plasma display, and the idea was even if folks didn't engage with the iPads, which a lot of folks didn't, we all know what the pickup rate is for these kinds of things, not everyone uses them, but what it did is it cycled through the 4 themes and gave you some of the best answers that were provided by visitors, and it provided the question as well, so you had a context for that. So even if you didn't touch the iPads, if you didn't look at the word cloud, at the end, you had an idea what other visitors were saying about the works that you just saw. And maybe it inspired you to go back, maybe it just got you thinking differently about the show. But there were really deep and personal responses that people were leaving, and we thought it was a really great way to show those. And we then leveraged those through social media by taking some of those responses, putting them on Facebook and whatnot, and sharing those responses with visitors who may or may not have pre- and post-visit kind of experiences for shapeshifting. And then just a couple more slides. In terms of observations, we had 160 observations over a period of about 5 days. 60% of those observed watched only the video. 32% watched the video and left a comment or read comments. A vast majority spent an average of 2 minutes at the iPad station, which is great for us, kind of considering it as a speed bump along the way. I consider technology these nice little speed bumps sometimes where folks get into the habit of just walking in a room and just kind of moving, looking at everything very quickly, reading a couple labels, and then walking out the door. If you can provide a nice interactive experience for folks, they may stop, look deeper, and we did notice quite a bit of that. In terms of demographics, our average user was about 55 to 64-year-old female, and this, in fact, is about 2/3 of our users were female, and this fits our PEMS demographic immediately. Our current rough demographic, on average, is a 54-year-old who's about 64% female. Of the 90% or so who watched the video and left or read comments, they looked at the art both before and after, which we thought was a nice success to see people engaging with the object and not just looking at the screen. A few people looked during, and a few never looked at all. That happens as well. People see a screen and they moved on. And a vast majority of people used the headphones that we provided. We provided simple biodynamic DTS1s, which are these simple kind of like, almost like an airplane piece, but without the fuzzy part on it. You just kind of could hold it up to your ear, or you could hook it onto your ear. It was very simple. It was a short 1.5-minute experience, so you didn't have to really put heavy headphones on your head. And of 3,000 responses, 1,300 were approved, 1,700 were trash. And when I say trash, 710 of those trash were praised, saying, "Pem is great, this was wonderful, I love the exhibition." 30, which we thought was fascinating, were actual messages directed to the artist, saying, "Pat Pruitt, you are amazing, you've inspired me to do this, this, and that," which we then sent those on to the artist, which they were very happy with. Have anyone encountered "I like pie"? We had 10 responses of "I like pie," and I had to assume that was a guard who every day was bored and was typing in "I like pie" to the iPads. So I do a little quick searching around, and I realized in Urban Dictionary, "I like pie" is a response that the kids are using these days to respectfully or not so respectfully decline from engaging you in that conversation. So if you said, "Go clean your room," they'd look at "I like pie," I guess. Kids were putting in "I like pie" to our responses. We had no idea what that was, but we learned something from that. 10 actually related to other works in the exhibition, and 990 of them were junk. Just kind of people randomly tapping into the keyboard or submitting the same answer twice. But we were pretty happy with it overall because we were looking for quality responses, not number of responses. And just taking a quick look at the number of total comments we received, Roxanne Swensel's piece got the most, 549. With the 17th Century Work Club, 226, which is one of the last pieces in the show. And then rating the breakdown, we got 634 were ones. You can see the numbers there. A rating of 5 for 62 of them. And we had some back and forth about what a 5 was. The curator may think that something was a 4, 4.5. I may have thought it was a 5. If I was moderating them at 12:30 in the morning, I might have thought more were 5s, or more were 4s, more were 3s. So it was kind of an interesting look when we look back at the numbers. 90% of the visitors who watched the video, as I mentioned, spent up to 2 minutes with the interactive, so that was a success for us, we felt. They looked at the art before and after, which was great. Many answers demonstrated very personal individual responses, which got us really excited. And in terms of the word cloud, words like time, expression, and art shrunk. You can see in this before and after, pretty significantly. Some words disappeared. Love, family, childhood, powerful seemed like new words, and words like life, home, place, and beauty get larger. So you're seeing on the left the original word cloud with the curator's voice, and on the right you're seeing the word cloud with the curator's voice and the ideas of the visitors over the course of the exhibition combining. Some lessons learned, the word cloud placement. We thought, you only saw it at the beginning of the show. We thought it would be a nice payoff to show it again at the end so people could get a feel for what they just saw, but we didn't do that. The summative experience we didn't think was interactive enough. It was very passive, but we did notice that folks were using it. The web component, while we spent the time and money to create a web component, we didn't advertise it extremely well, and we didn't make mention of it much in the gallery or at all. So it didn't get a lot of use. And in terms of placement, in events testing and placement, in terms of placement of the objects, we'll be curious to know if objects placed in certain sight lines that have iPads got more responses than others. We did notice a decline when you got to the third and the fourth galleries. The last couple of iPads, people would contribute less. Could be just visitor fatigue when it got down to the end. We can't rule that possibility out. But I've already taken a little too much time. I want to thank Karen Kramer-Russell, who was the brains behind the exhibition. She's an amazing curator to work with, and Michelle Moon, who was our assistant director of adult programs. It was very much a team collaboration and a project that all three of us were very proud of. So we do have time for questions directly to me, and then some questions overall. I'd be happy to answer any of those if any of you have them, be them technical or content. Yes, Sylvia.
Can you use subtitles on the video?
Yes.
Did you feel that people were sort of wearing headsets or rather prefer to sort of read?
They were wearing the headsets, but what was nice about that is when you have an iPad and say a group of 2 or 3 people are trying to use it, the captions allow folks to look over one shoulder and you can take the whole experience in without actually using the headsets. And if someone doesn't like the cootie factor, of putting headsets on their head, you've got the captions right there and they can experience it. It was a little bit of both.
Did you have to replace the headsets in the course of the project?
I think we replaced 3 units and they were like $18 a piece or something like that. So it was great. Yeah, we had no problem with that. So we did have to replace a couple. Kids get a little over ambitious and kind of yank them and they get broken. But yeah, it wasn't too bad. Yeah. Yeah.
So you use WordPress as kind of your backend CMS, and how did you develop the front-end stuff? Interactive?
Yes, the iPads were done in HTML5 as a kind of a microsite, so just designing a site for the iPad, and we're just using wireless to connect to that. And the word cloud, what was happening with the word cloud is we had, it was both PHP and XML feeding the word cloud from the CMS, and that was dynamic and happening kind of on the fly. And I should mention that everything was done in-house except for design and development, which was done by a colleague of ours who we work closely with on many projects who actually worked for the museum in the past. So, yeah.
What do you think with what do you think you were talking about pickup rate in terms of usage, total visitorship versus what do you consider offhand if you don't have concrete statistics? What do you think the pickup rate of people engaging in media?
In terms of overall visitors to visitors who actually engage with this, we don't have the exact numbers based on the way we measure how people come into the museum, but our guess is probably about 3% of our visitors, and in the industry it seems to be the unfortunate reality that sometimes that's the case. And of course you always have 90% approval rating, or not always, but quite often you have 90% approval rating of that 3%, but yes, limited number of visitors. But those visitors who did had very enriching, engaging experiences, and that was our ultimate goal. We didn't expect every person coming through, nor even a majority of people coming through to actually engage with it, but the ones that did got really rich experiences out of it, and that was what we're trying to do. But yeah, those were the numbers off my head. Yeah. Sylvia.
Did you notice any difference in, I noticed that some had like seating and some were
Yes.
kind of people standing.
Yeah.
Did you notice any difference when you did the observation whether people stayed longer in the seating place or not?
We didn't do that as part of the evaluation, but I can say the seated ones probably got used more often, and the reason for that is that every museum doesn't have enough seating, and it's a problem we always face with our design because you want to get as many art objects in there and as much interpretive stuff in there as well. But when people see seats, they generally sit in them. So I did see quite a few people, anecdotally, I can say, using the seated experience more. Yeah. But I don't have any hard facts or stats on that. Yeah, Gary?
Jim, did you have any problems with like the Wi-Fi issues with the syncing and stuff with the iPads?
It's a good question. We didn't notice any at the beginning until about 2/3 of the way through when we got more and more content that was being dynamically updated. It took a little bit longer to upload, and we did notice a little sluggishness. We attribute most of that to bandwidth issues within the museum, not so much the way everything was designed technically. We were running into some bandwidth issues institutionally, like at our desks, at the same time that we're having the issues in the galleries. But overall, it was pretty responsive, and we were pretty happy with it. Yeah.
Did you feel that the fact that people could not see their comments posted then right away was something that was a limitation, or they felt like, okay, what's happening to
Yeah,
us now?
it's something we struggled with, and I'll be honest, we did notice repeat entries, and my observation, my thought for that was someone submitted their answer, didn't see it appear immediately, and submitted it again. And we weighed the pros and cons, and to be quite frank, most folks wouldn't see their answer immediately, but they would be up very quickly. So if they went home and checked out the website and looked for their comment, almost every time, probably within about an hour and a half, your answer would have been approved. Doesn't give you that immediate response that you're looking for, but we felt that moderation and keeping things on topic was more important to us, and we didn't have the FTEs to have someone sit, as you might imagine, watching them live and then adding them on a minute by minute basis. But yeah, it is a limitation that we chose to deal with. So.
And how many people checked afterwards, or do you have a sense of statistically?
I didn't cross-reference those numbers. I will tell you that less people than desirable went to the website because we simply didn't make folks aware enough of it. You know, it just didn't become a priority at a certain point. It was more of an in-gallery experience. Yeah. But you can go check it out if you want. The website is live. It's just go to pem.org, Shapeshifting, and you'll, under past exhibitions, you can get there and you can check it out. Word cloud is actually moving, and you can see what it looked like in the galleries that way. Any other questions? Any broader questions for? Yeah.
Less broad, but so you said you have 3 staff monitoring.
Yes.
And then just sporadically throughout the day, or is it like different shifts?
Mm-hmm.
You said there were like 3,000 total comments.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. This is basically what we would do is, you know, if I was eating my lunch at my desk, which is a quite common experience, I'd just sit and I'd flip through some and, you know, check them in the morning, check them at night, and we were all kind of broken up. So we were covering virtually every 2-hour increment. We pretty much had them covered. And in fact, we even had a 4th person at times jumping in. Person who's managing our website was jumping in and helping us with it as well. So it worked out reasonably well. But again, the restriction of not letting comments go live immediately can be a problem. We've since done a couple of projects where we do allow content to go just live to the iPads, and then we just deal with it afterward. A couple other projects that I could talk to you all about offline if you're curious of how we're using iPads in different ways. But yeah.
Have you thought about using Facebook Connect or?
We have. We actually, for one project we're working on right now, we thought about, you know, hooking right into the Facebook API and letting people send. It's a hats exhibition that we have from the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the idea is you can't touch hats or see hats in the show. But you can go to this interactive that we've created, take a picture of yourself and virtually try on 14 different hats, and then send it to yourself via email. We had copyright restrictions from the artists and from lending institutions that would not allow us to hook into the Facebook API, but it's something we really would have loved to do, is if people could just send that image directly into Facebook and, you know, become a great marketing tool about, you know, what you're doing at the museum. But something we're definitely thinking of doing, going in and Facebook Connect and all the other options that we could use. But, yeah. Great. Thank you all. It's 12 o'clock on the money, so